Lighting. We're still talking about lighting. Let's face it, you can't take great pictures without lighting, and especially not portraits. So tonight, I want to talk about what I sincerely feel is the best way for photographers to learn portrait lighting. Stay tuned. Hey gang, happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining me. I hope that you are all safe and healthy and, of course, taking pictures. If you're here and you're live, please, you know the drill. Check in, leave a little note in the chat. Let me know you're here and where you're watching from. And if you're watching the recorded version, no sweat. Do me a favor and go ahead and leave a note in the comments. Let me know you're here. Maybe wait a little while and feel free to ask a question. I'll do my best to answer it. And of course, thumbs up, always greatly appreciated. It helps other photographers find out about the show. So number one, it's great to be back. I took a week off last week. I was prepping for my first in-person speaking event, which I did in North Carolina, Raleigh-Durham area this past weekend. It was a ton of fun to be back in front of people and presenting. So I want to say hey to all the folks from PPAvency. That's the Professional Photographers of North Carolina. They are the regional group for PPA in North Carolina. Awesome group. In fact, they're the group that gave me my first opportunity at a really big speaking engagement years ago. So they kind of hold a special place in my heart. And I always have a lot of fun down there. And actually, you can thank them for the topic that we're going to talk about tonight. So real quick, one more thing that I want to share with you, and then I'm going to dive in because I have a lot to talk about, and I'm really hoping that you guys will pony up with some questions because I have a feeling there are a lot of you that are having struggles with lighting. So let's talk about it. Let's try and solve some problems, right? But you don't want to miss this. Here's a free educational opportunity for all of you. And the best part of it is it's an opportunity to learn from somebody even cooler than me, and it's not going to cost you a dime. So this weekend, actually Friday and Saturday, Bedford Camera in Little Rock, Arkansas is hosting Photo Expo Live 2021. Friday, the keynote presentation is being done by the one and only Joel Grimes. If you don't know who he is, Google that name. You should know who he is. And then Saturday, me, myself, and I'll be doing the keynote Saturday morning. Registration is free. There are classes going on all day. My keynote on Saturday morning is at 9:30 a.m. Central Time. So for those of you in Europe, it'll be like, in the early to middle afternoon. For those of you here in the US, you may have to get up a little bit early to see it, but it's all about creativity. It is all about sparking ideas and how to really get things going to stop being a zombie photographer. So don't miss it. Like I said, it's completely free. All you have to do is register. I am going to share the link that you need in the chat window. It's already underneath the video down there. So if you're watching recorded, the link is there. Make sure you check it out. These presentations are not being recorded for viewing later. So indeed, you have to kind of show up, watch it live, but they will be interactive. You will have an opportunity to talk and ask questions and all that kind of stuff. So don't miss out, okay? All right, so that being said, we're going to talk about lighting. Chuck Hill from CPE, Carolina Photo Expo. Thanks, Chuck. It was great to see you guys. Great to see Adrian, all of you. I had a ton of fun this weekend, I'm not going to lie. So we talked for 3 weeks about modifiers and the differences between them and trying to make you understand or give you the opportunity to understand that you don't have to have 15 different modifiers. You don't have to spend a ton of money and have all these crazy modifiers. In fact, if you actually learn how to use the inverse square law, you can get away with just a few very simple modifiers. And as I explained, I'm not making the manufacturers out to be the bad guy, but there's a reality here, right? If you buy even an inexpensive modifier, an umbrella, a softbox, whatever, and you take care of it and you keep it out of humidity, you keep it out of direct sunlight for storage purposes. You can take it outside, but for the sake of storage, keep it out of direct sunlight. Modifier is going to last you 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, depending on the quality of the materials. So think about it. You do have a finite number of photographers who need these kind of modifiers, even though there's new photographers coming along all the time. So if everybody buys like one umbrella, one softbox, and then they don't need anything for 10, 15, 20 years, these companies that manufacture these lighting modifiers, they're going to go out of business. So they need to keep coming up with ways to get you excited about modifiers and to convince you that you need new modifiers. Some of the stuff they come up with is revolutionary and it will make your job easier. Other stuff, it just has cool racing stripes and maybe it goes together a different way, but it's not really easier and it's certainly not better light. Please understand that with all these modifiers, if you learned anything from me in those 3 episodes of The Last Frame, you can pretty much do the same thing with all of them if you pay attention, if you learn a little bit about the inverse square law, okay? So this weekend actually made me realize something because I was working with photographers of all different skill levels when I was in North Carolina. And I did my presentation was all about fashion portraits, and I did some demos in their trade show for Stella Pro. We had a lot of fun. And then we also did these things called shootouts where both nights we set up little studio, type setups, and people could come in and we would shoot for literally a couple hours. And both nights we were shooting well past midnight and having a lot of fun. But in the process, one of the things that I was doing was asking photographers after they took their first test shot at my stations where I was kind of mentoring to stop before they kept going and take a look at the shot and break it down, meaning tell me what they liked and didn't like about the light that was already there. Because when they walked up, there was already lights set up. I wanted every photographer to be making their own decisions about the lighting. So I would really kind of force them to say, you know what? As a matter of fact, I don't want that fill light as bright. Let's turn it down or let's move it out of the way. Or I don't want that shadow there. I want it to be a little shorter. So let's move the light closer to the camera. And we managed and manipulated the light for every photographer that came up. But that taught me something, and that is that a lot of these photographers who are already making money with their cameras, are still somewhat intimidated by lighting. And so what they've done, which, believe me, I'm not picking on the folks in North Carolina because this is something that photographers all over the place are doing, is they find a couple of lighting setups or a couple of methodologies that kind of work for them, and then that's their lane. They're afraid to kind of branch out, and they're afraid to experiment. So their lighting kind of gets very stale for them. And that also, by the way, think of that psychologically. If you're kind of bored with the lighting you're doing, that becomes part of the emotional setup for you to look at that brand new softbox with the yellow racing stripes or whatever somebody has released and say, oh, yeah, cool, I'm going to get that thing. And then you're spending money that you don't really need to spend. So I have talked about this concept before in various places and various pieces, but I thought tonight, let's kind of put it all together in, shall we say, one argument, beginning to end, of what I feel is the best way to learn lighting. So let me start right out of the box and say this. You should be skeptical. You know why? Because there are tons of YouTube videos that say the best way to do this. There are tons of articles in the photo blogs, the best way to do this. And you go look at those videos, you go look at those articles, and half of them don't tell you squat. And all they do tell you is what that photographer does. They don't even tell you why that photographer does it. So you're just supposed to take that person's word and you're supposed to apply it to your work as if you're going to be amazing when you do. That's not how it works. So I'm going to tell you what I believe sincerely is the best way, but I'm going to break it down and I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show you why. But before we even talk about lighting for portraits, let's step back even further. And let's talk about light in general. So, we'll go to the very beginning, right? We know that photography requires light in order to make a picture. And 99.9% of us, if not more, started by photographing outside or inside, but with natural light. I've actually never met the photographer that started with studio light, and I'm sure there's a few out there somewhere, but I've never met them. Most of us start, we get a camera because we're interested. Maybe we take pictures in our house, relatives, friends. Maybe we're taking pictures outside, whatever, but we're starting with natural light. So outdoors, especially when you're shooting with natural light in the daytime, you've got one light source, one, the sun. So everything you do, it's one light. And if you're photographing people outside in the daytime, one light. So you're shooting one light portraits if you're photographing people outside. If you have a cloudy, overcast day, you're working with a huge softbox. The first time I ever did a workshop in Seattle, Washington, we went to shoot outside on that particular day and it was really overcast. And I walked out the door and I looked up and I was like, gosh, could it get any dingier here? And one of the attendees just laughed and said, hey, we like that light. It's called the Seattle Softbox. And it took me a minute for it to kick in, but the idea is, it rains a lot in Seattle. It's frequently cloudy and overcast. And they refer to that light as the Seattle Softbox. And indeed, it's soft, even light. So you've got direct light if it's direct sunlight. You've got essentially a softbox effect if you've got clouds and overcast. And then you have bright white sidewalks that work as reflectors, white or light colored walls that work as reflectors. So outside, you have a direct single light source, but also you do have natural or man-made modifiers built in. And it is actually harder to learn really, really good lighting with natural light than it is studio lighting, because outdoors, you can't tell Mother Nature to make the clouds go away. You can't tell Mother Nature, no, I don't want the sun over here. I want it over here. You have very little control. You can modify that light by using scrims or diffusers or reflectors, but you can't really control that light. In the studio, you can control everything. So studio lighting, believe it or not, is a ton easier. So that raises the obvious question. Why do so many people struggle with studio light? I believe it's for a few simple reasons, and they are simple reasons. One, the way that we traditionally teach lighting is antiquated, overwhelming, and not productive. I'm going to come back to that because those are some big words. More importantly, the other problem with people getting started with studio lighting is they quickly get ahead of themselves. How do they do that? Simple. They watch some YouTube videos, and I'm not going to diss on anybody on YouTube, but hear me out. They watch some YouTube videos, or maybe they read some articles, or even they get a book on lighting. Well, anybody that's teaching lighting, any book, any articles, they're quickly going to progress from one light to 2 lights, 3 lights, 4 lights, and so on. And let's face it, when you get to 2, 3, or 4 lights, you can do some cool stuff if you are creative and if you understand how to manage that lighting. So people tend to want to dive into the deep end of the pool. And if they have the disposable income, they'll go out and they'll buy 2, 3, 4 lights and 1 or 2 different modifiers and maybe some gels. And then they have all this cool stuff. Once they've purchased that stuff, once you have it, you want to use it. You don't want to be patient. You don't want to take your time. And you certainly don't want to work with just one light when you've got 3 other lights sitting there that you can take advantage of. And as a result, you never really learn how to see light. Therein lies the challenge. So, how do I recommend that we do this? How do I encourage you to start? So let's talk about the gear stuff first. Speedlights, studio strobes, LEDs. Which is the right one? It's going to depend on several factors. One, are you also going to need those lights to stop really, really fast action, in which case you're still looking at strobes for the most part. Do you need to overpower the sun? If you're lazy and you want to be a zombie and do that crap that everybody's been doing for 5 years now, then you probably need a strobe. But if you want to really learn how to do lighting, if you're not lazy and still occasionally want to make it, appear that you're overpowering the sun, but you're willing to work a little bit harder to find the right location based on the time of day and where you're shooting to do that, cool. And if you are not afraid to raise your ISO a little bit, LED actually makes a lot more sense. So what it comes down to is really, it doesn't matter which of the three you're working with. The suggestions that I'm about to give you tonight in terms of how to learn lighting will work all three. But here's what I do encourage you to do. I am a firm believer that still in today's world, regardless of almost whatever you are shooting, one piece of lighting equipment that every photographer needs, and this will change in time, but for now, one piece of lighting equipment that almost every photographer should have is a simple Speedlight. They are small, they are lightweight, they are portable. You can put them on camera, do bounce flash, hold it off camera, do bounce flash, even do off camera direct lighting. They are a great utility light that you can do incredible things with in a pinch. They fit in a camera bag easily, etc., etc. Beyond that, we're talking about building out a system, meaning when you get to the point where you're going to buy that second light, that third light, that fourth light, and then where you're going to add umbrellas or softboxes or beauty dishes, now we have this challenge of how do we make sure that we are making the task easier and not harder? How do we make sure that we're not spending more money than we need to? And to do that, what I recommend that you do before you buy any lights, if you haven't purchased lights yet, and even if you have, before you buy any more, you want to do this exercise as a gut check to make sure that you're purchasing the right things. You're going to do your research into different lighting systems. You're going to decide, am I a Godox person? Am I a Pro Photo person? Am I an FJ Westcott person? Better yet, am I going to go LEDs? And am I going to work with Stella Pros, the LED lights that I work with? You're going to do your research into the systems. And then you're going to put your credit cards away in a safe place. And you are going to dream big, because you're not spending money yet. Dream big. And you are on paper going to map out your dream lighting system. How many lights of what brand and what model? What kind of light stands do you want? How many do you need? What about modifiers? You're going to use mag mods. What are you doing? Okay, all of it. You are going to map it all out and you're going to list it out. And you're going to do your research to figure that out. Which brands do you like? Why? Etc. You notice I'm not going to tell you have to use this brand or you have to use that brand. You guys already know. LEDs, in fact, everybody in North Carolina saw me using the Stella Pro lights for LEDs, and we did some awesome stuff. In fact, Sunday night, we did the shootout in the hotel lobby there. It was an Embassy Suites, and they had this 12-foot wide video wall. You guys have already hopefully seen my video about shooting with LEDs as a background, LED TV screen as a background. We did some awesome fashion shots in front of this wall. But when I'm using strobes, I'm using Godox. That's my brand. I'm not going to tell you they're better or worse. I'm going to tell you should do your research. And I've talked about why I use those brands. But you map out your system. Then what you do, especially if you're just starting, you haven't purchased any lights yet. Once you've done that homework, you buy one light, one stand. You need a trigger, of course. And that's it. A light, a stand, and a trigger. Because understand that once you've done that, you can take a portrait like what you see on the screen right here. Now, absolutely, is the lighting here a little crisp? I won't say harsh because we only have, we do have fall off, and it's hard fall off, but it's not harsh. We don't have any horrible shadows. It's just a very crisp light that we have, but it's one light. You'll notice if you look up above me, I've got this set up with one, let me unclick that there, one Speedlight. That's all we're doing this with, okay? Now, you could do a lot with one Speedlight, but the reason why you're going to go to the trouble of mapping out this whole system and then buying one light is because you are going to master that one light. You could do it with a mannequin. You could do it with a friend or a relative or a spouse. but you are going to master making decent light with one light. And I'm talking about one light, no modifiers, just like you see up above me, okay? Now, once you get to the point where you're feeling, okay, I've done everything I can do with that, then you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna go to the dollar store and you're gonna add in, whoops, let's go to the side one here. You're gonna add in a white foam core reflector. And then you're gonna realize just by turning that reflector on and off, okay, you can get what appears to be a fill light. And then if you add a second dollar for a second Walmart reflector, and you have a setup like what you see here, you can actually get some really nice light with one light. So that being said, let me point one thing out here before I forget, and then Roberto, excuse me, I'll answer your question. And then I'm going to show you how you're going to learn with this one light. Because it's easy to say, well, learn with one light. What does that mean? I'm going to show you. But since I have it on the screen, in fact, actually, you know what we'll do? Let's switch these. I'm going to move that over to that side. If you watched my modifier series that I did, I talked about the positioning of the lights and the modifiers based on the height. Because, of course, we don't want the light too low. We don't want shadows on the tops of the eyes, top of the nose, top of the lip, tops of the collarbones. That's how they light zombies in Hollywood, right? We don't want zombie lighting. So it's important to have the light high. Now, this would seem like actually really good light placement in terms of height. But I want to show you something so that it is in your visual database now and that you will start to hopefully remember this and pay attention to this when you set your lights. And it doesn't matter, by the way, what I'm about to show you, it applies to direct flash, direct LEDs, maybe you're working with an LED panel or you're working with an umbrella, softbox beauty dish, it doesn't matter. The height on this stand and this light seems very, very functional. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring the picture back big. And I want you to notice that we barely see a dot of a catch light right along the edge of the eyelids, meaning it's actually a tad too high. So if I come over here and I adjust the height ever so slightly and bring it down, I can now at least get the catch lights in the eye where I can see them in both eyes. They are still very small because this is a direct flash. But I wanted to show you this with the direct flash because when you're using direct flash, that's the easiest time, in my opinion, for us to miss the fact that the catch light is gone because the light's too high. Why do we miss it? Because it's so small in the first place, okay? So your up and down placement, as much as I use the guideline, if you watched the 3 videos before that, I usually put the bottom of the softbox or the bottom of the modifier kind of at the subject's chin, with the idea being that I usually want at least 2/3 of the modifier above my subject's head. Using a similar height reference, that doesn't work all the time. So the key to it is actually watching the catch lights. So we've got our setup here. Let me, actually, I'll leave it set up the way it is here now, but I'm going to switch this so that I'm looking almost straight down. Now, for those of you that are new to lighting, okay, I've talked about this before. I've demoed this in a few different ways, but I'm going to break it down one more time. If you're new to lighting and if you've already done what I'm discouraging, meaning kind of dove in with a couple of different lights and you're trying all different kinds of things, and sometimes your light looks okay, other times it looks like pure crap, other times you get lucky and it's amazing, and then it's back to pure crap again, and that's frustrating. That's in part because you're not putting in the practice and you're not creating a discipline. So I'm going to show you a super uber easy way to ensure that you can get really, really good lighting from an exposure standpoint and even quality standpoint almost every single time you shoot. So one of the first things that I want to point out, this circle that I have in the middle of the studio, it is a 10-foot diameter circle. My model is sitting in the middle of it. So basically it's 5 feet from her head to the outside of the circle in any direction. That means by default, the light is 5 feet from her. The background is 5 feet from her. The outside of the circle, 5 feet from her. It just so happens the camera happens to be about 5 feet from her. That is going to vary depending upon the format that you shoot with, the focal length of the lens, and the composition that you want. So don't think that your camera has to be at 5 feet, right? It just so happens, since I'm a micro 4/3 shooter and I'm shooting with a 42 millimeter lens, which is a 90 millimeter, excuse me, a 45 millimeter lens, which is a 90 millimeter equivalent for you full frame shooters. That just happens to be where it works out. But this whole concept does not apply to the camera placement. It's only the light, subject, and background placement. So the easiest way for you to do it, also when you're at the dollar store buying those styrofoam borbs for $1 each, buy a little roll of string. It can be kite string. It doesn't have to be fancy. If you want to be a little fancier, go to Amazon and, you can order some like nylon cord that's got color, that kind of thing to it, whatever you want to do. But tie a piece of string on your light stand and then stretch it out, measure it 5 feet on a tape measure and cut it at 5 feet once it's tied. So imagine, if you will, the circle, and you don't have to, you don't have to put a circle in your studio. This is what the string's for. You do a little bit of practice with that string set up at 5 foot, approximately, a foot or two off to the side of the camera like this. And let's say hypothetically, you figure out, perfect, ISO 200, f6.3 is the perfect exposure for me. Great. So now, as long as I keep the light on the edge of that circle, I can move the light all the way around to the right or to the left, and the exposure stays the same all the way around. And I know that a lot of you have experienced the situation where you start out a shoot and you get your exposure dialed in and it looks great. You've checked the back of the camera, it looks great. And then you're shooting and things are going well, and then you get the idea, you know what, let me move the light over here a little bit, and then you go right back to shooting and you forget to chimp at that point, and you forget to see how your exposure looks. And in reality, what you did is you either moved the light closer to the subject or further away from the subject. So now everything you're shooting is either underexposed, or worse yet, it's blown out because you've put the light closer to the subject and you're blowing out details. And it's devastating because if you don't chimp every other frame and you just keep going and going and going, you're shooting who knows how many frames only to find out that they're poorly exposed. So this trick, basically, anytime you move the stand, all you got to do is grab that string, slide it out to the person's face, boom, done. You've got it at the right distance, okay? Or for that matter, you just train your subject, hand them the end of the string, slide until you're done, boom. Just have them hold it like right on their chest, and then you go wherever you have to go. Please understand something. For those of you that think you got to be kind of like, Joe Cool with the camera and the lights, your subject is not going to think you're some amateur moron because you're using a string. In fact, your subject's going to think you're pretty doggone smart. And when it's all said and done with, you're going to have more good pictures to provide your subject and to show them for proofs, whatever. You're going to look really smart and really good. People don't care about what techniques we use. They don't care how you do it. They really don't care how good is your gear. They care about how good are the pictures. This is a way for you to make sure you get really good pictures, because also keep in mind, think this through, gang. You can practice this setup in your living room. You can practice it in your garage. And then if you have to go on location, maybe you're going to do a portrait. You're doing a commercial business portrait for the very first time, but you've got to do it in the realtor's office. And you're worried, oh my God, I don't know what the lighting's going to be like. Is it big enough, etc.? Most of you in your living room can find 10 feet to be able to practice this. And then when you go out on location, you're going to take that string, you're going to do the same setup. And your very first frame, your exposure is going to be spot on because you've practiced it and you know that at those distances and those settings, that's the right exposure. So yes, you're still going to do a test shot or two. Yes, you're still going to chimp. But what you're not going to be doing is fumbling and bubbling like, oh my God, it's too bright, it's too dark, what's going on? I don't know what happened. Because you've already worked it out. There's no guesswork. And if you spend the $70 and you invest in a mannequin, and actually I think the price just went up a little bit, but they're still under $100. You invest in a mannequin, you can practice with the mannequin, so you also know not only the distance and the exposure settings, but also where on the outside of that circle, how far from the camera do you want that light placed? But we can go, whoops, let me set that so it's going to track to the subject there. Okay. We can go all the way around the subject in any direction. And as long as we stay on the edge of the circle, the exposure is going to stay correct. This same technique is going to work with beauty dishes. It's going to work with umbrellas. I mean, so, you see here, we've just done it with a Speedlight. If I switch over to my Collapsible Softbox, which many of you know is my favorite modifier. For those of you in North Carolina, that's what you saw me use on stage when I was doing my presentation. Same thing. And you can see here, even from reference, I've got the bottom of the box just below my subject's eyes. You can see because it's a 26 centimeter softbox, I've got a slightly bigger catch light in the eye. Same thing with an umbrella. If we load up an umbrella, we're going to get a bigger catch light, okay? But same, we can go all around the circle, and the lighting's going to be softer. We're not going to have to worry as much. If I take this umbrella around the circle here, let me set this up, and, we'll start to move around. Okay, we've got a much softer light, but same idea. As we come around to the side, you notice how it's getting more dramatic. It gets more depth. And then, maybe we want that vibe, but we want to be able to soften it just a little bit. We can still add the white reflector, and we can do the same thing. So the easiest way to learn lighting is one light at a time, but I still haven't really given you proof. I haven't really convinced you. Don't worry. I understand. But that's the setup. We could stop now and we could just, hang out for a little while and chat. And that's the easiest way. There's the answer. But I know that nobody here wants to just do one light portraits. Look, I get it. I'm a nerd about light. I love to play with light and color and all that kind of stuff, right? So obviously, how do we progress? Well, this is why it's important to start with one light. When you start with 2 lights, 3 lights, reflectors, modifiers, you don't have the visual database to easily see the nuances from one light to the next, to understand what's happening. Why is it happening? What are you missing? That's important, okay? So let me switch over. I'm going to go to my softbox. We're going to discard those. We'll go to the softbox light here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So background lights are easy, right? We know if we put a background light in, that's going to show up pretty quickly. In fact, here, instead of me just saying it, let's go ahead, and since we're working with monolights here, let me grab a light to put back here for a background light. And I'm going to bring that, of course, whoops. Now, right now, it's kind of working like a hair light, but we're going to turn it all the way around to the background, right? And let's see here. Yeah, that's looking pretty good there. So I want to go lower. And, background light, that's pretty simple, pretty obvious, right? The more I turn the power down, and for that matter, even, whoops, aim it down. Okay, or I turn the power up. Really easy to see what's happening there. So that being said, though, what if we want a rim light? In fact, for that matter, let's just say this is our second light. So there's our setup now. And that's attractive. It's nice, but we still want a little something going on here, right? We want to add a rim light, or some people refer to them as kickers. So I'm going to grab another light over here, and I'm going to put it in. And this is where the magic of learning with one light really happens. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn that background light off completely. We're going to make it go away. Okay. So obviously, the second we put that in there, poof. Now, some of you will say, well, sure, Joe, it's really obvious to see what that light's doing because it's grossly overexposed. You're right. So let's just go ahead. Let's turn it way down and make it subtle. Okay. The best part of it is since we're used to seeing just the one light setup, that jumps out really quick. And it's really easy to see. It's really easy to notice. It's about training your brain to see the subtleties. Now, look, when we're sitting here just watching this, television screen or the computer screen and watching this stuff happen on YouTube, yes, this stuff jumps out at you pretty quickly. It does. But I know a lot of you have already experienced the idea that you went ahead and you decided you were going to do a rim light, and your results wound up looking more like that, where you blew out all the detail on the side of the face, right? Or you blew out the detail in the hair. I'm sorry, gang, but that doesn't look cool. That doesn't look good. It honestly just looks really sloppy, and it's distracting because it's so bright, right? So you're teaching yourself to be able to see the nuances, the little details, right? Even the idea of bringing this light forward on the circle, and I'm going to keep using the circle as a reference. Right now I can kind of get away with it. You notice the exposure is functional. I can see all of the detail in the hair. But look what happens if we turn this up a little bit. Notice how we're starting to light up the nose. That's distracting. In fact, we kind of got this weird shadow thing going on there. It's like, what's that all about, right? And then if we get it too bright, now the tip of the nose or the side of the nose is brighter than the eyes, and we just really kind of lose the subject. So when we're working in a studio and we're working with multiple lights, the idea with multiple lights is subtlety. Just like outdoors, just like outside with the sun, you only need one light to make a nice portrait, period. So then, Joe, why does everybody want to add multiple lights? It's the subtleties. When you add these subtle accents to your lighting, you are creating depth. You are creating mood. Because, of course, once we get into that, we can go ahead and here, we'll be a little bit dramatic. And, we could do this next exercise all night long. But I'm going to purposely add a little bit of extra shadow in there, right? And then I'll go ahead and I'll turn this one on. But I am going to turn it down fairly far. But then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add some color into it, okay? And yeah, even down a little bit more, okay? And then actually here, just so that we can maybe make this a little bit more interesting, let's give our subject some clothes. Oof, not that. That's horrible. Yeah, we'll do that, okay? So there, she's got a blue turtleneck on. And then that background light that I set up before, we can turn that on, but heck, we can go ahead even and we can make that go from gray to blue, or better yet, we can maybe throw some like orange in there, and we can play around. If we start to pull the power up on that, we can even get it to be pretty kind of intense. And you see it, we could do this all night long. But by setting that one light first and really learning, working with one light, what does it do? Where does it need to be? Because the one light, the front light is the most important. In fact, here, I even missed it. You guys should have called me out. Look, I've got blue light on her nose, because I know some of you are like, oh my God, that's really cool with the orange and the blue. It is really cool. That blue nose is not cool, right? So how are we going to get that? We're going to come back here. We're going to take that light back a little bit behind her. And now the nose isn't blue. We still have the blue accents. We have the blue coming down across the shoulders. Okay? So once again, you start with one light. Keep it super simple. Keeping your lighting simple is nothing more than the idea of breaking it down into simple pieces so that you can pay attention to what you're doing, so that you can see the changes that are happening as you add additional lights or as you change your modifiers. Even for me, if this is my light and I'm shooting this, as I look at her face here, I'm not a big fan of how dark it is up in this corner of her eye socket. So, and personal taste, okay? I'm going to bring my light over a little bit more, which is going to soften that. It is going to reduce a little bit of the blue over here. Absolutely. But for me, this is a much nicer, much softer, more flattering scenario. So Gabriel Smith has a great question here. And let's just talk about this for a second. because I want to make it really clear. It says, Joe, do you recommend getting set.a.light? So here's the first thing. I am not sponsored by set.a.light. I do have a relationship with them in the fact simply that I communicate with them. Johan, who is the owner and creator of set.a.light, I have talked to him several times via email. He was kind enough to give me the discount, which you will find the code in the description below the video. So check that out. Here's the thing. Obviously, this software, you're seeing me do a lot of cool stuff, and a lot of you are like, oh my God, that's amazing. But I need you to understand something, please. Number one, you are not going to become amazing at lighting with a piece of software. You have to pick up a light, and you have to go get a subject. Start with a mannequin if you want, but you have to actually physically practice. So what's the benefit of this software? The benefit of this software is that everything you do on here is properly calibrated to the way your camera is going to work. If I work out an exposure here based on a 200 watt second strobe, and then I go ahead and I go down to my studio and work with the same settings, same distances, etc., then yep, it will be exactly the same. That's what's great about it. Okay. There is a learning curve to this software. I'm only using, honestly, probably about 60% of what this software is capable of doing as you're watching me do this. There's a lot more that it can do, but just like anything else, there's a learning curve. So am I encouraging you all to go get it? No, I'm actually not encouraging you to get it. Could this be helpful to you if you have the discipline to learn how to use the software, to work with the software, and then go pick up your camera and set up lighting and try what you created in the software? Oh, hell yes. Absolutely. So I hope, Gabriel, that answer helps. I know that was a bit of a longer answer than you were looking for, but by no means am I pimping the software. What I'm really pimping, gang, is avoid the urge to spend money on every lighting gadget known to man. Purchase lighting gear that is going to advance you, that is going to help you, but understand that none of it advances you or helps you unless you put in the practice and unless you learn the basics of lighting. And that's why I decided to go ahead and do another lighting episode tonight so that I can keep breaking it down so that I can really get the point across of what is my thought process in terms of how I actually put lighting together. Jody Cortez, will you be at WPPI in 2 weeks? As it stands right now, so and please folks, I don't want to have any political debates or anything like that. As it stands right now, I am planning to fly into Vegas on Wednesday the 18th, so it's 2 weeks from today. I will then visit WPPI Wednesday afternoon, and then also Thursday. I'm not presenting. I have no work obligations there. It's Vegas, right? And then from there, I'm going to Precision Camera, which, since you mentioned that, let me just switch over here really quick. For those of you that are near Austin, Texas, this one's not online. This is, whoops, there it is. This is in person. On Friday, August 20th, I'll be teaching a workshop on understanding creativity. So this is not the online presentation that I do. This is hands-on. Like, there will be creativity challenges and assignments that we're doing. It's actually one of the most fun workshops that I do for me. And then on the Saturday, we'll be doing Bold and Beautiful Fashion Portraits, which is the same talk I just did in Carolina, except this is a hands-on workshop. Each one of the attendees will create their own fashion portraits that no other photographer will shoot. I will be their assistant. I will be guiding them. I will be helping them. So the links for these are also in the show notes below in that. So as it stands now, today, I'm scheduled to do that. My flights are booked. I am supposed to be there, but I'm not going to lie. I'm kind of really concerned about where all the COVID numbers are going and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I am vaccinated, but still there's a lot of uncertainty right now. So we'll kind of see what's happening. I will say the other thing that is kind of worrisome, shall we say, about WPPI, And this is by no means, I'm not dumping on WPPI and Emerald Exhibitions, but I downloaded the app last night for this year's WPI, and there's less than 50 exhibitors signed up. It's going to be a really, really small trade show. Nikon's not going to be there. Olympus isn't going to be there. I think Canon and Fuji have very small booths. Excuse me. Fuji and Panasonic have very small booths, and I mean really small booths. Canon's going to have their booth there, but not a lot going on. So the big reason for anybody to go WPPI this year, in my opinion, is the educational track. So if you do weddings, you do portraits, amazing educational track this year and every year at WPPI. It's awesome for that. But it's definitely not going to be the normal WPPI, which is disappointing. And then, of course, Photo Plus is right around the corner here in New York. That's the end of October. New York is like starting to shut things down, tighten things up. They're going to do the vaccination passport thing. And again, please, no debates. I'm just saying that's what's happening. So it's going to be tough. And I know that there's been quite a few manufacturers that have already pulled out of Photo Plus. The bottom line reality is until we really get this COVID stuff under control, I think, honestly, around the world, it's going to be really hit or miss for in-person presentations. So if I'm being really honest, I spent most of this past weekend in a hotel with a whole lot of people that weren't wearing masks. I didn't wear a mask most of the time. I wore masks in tight spaces like in elevators, but I didn't wear a mask most of the time. So if I get to the end of this week and I'm not sick, I will probably continue with my plans and, visit Vegas and then go on to precision camera. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Okay. So let's see, Sheree, and I hope I'm saying that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. I'm kind of getting into photography, and my main goal is to be able to use natural light as good as Irene Rudnick. Okay. Natural light is my thing for sure. She went on to say natural light is my thing for sure. I don't want to be a flash photographer guy. Yes, I have a Speedlight in my arsenal, but natural light. So, on one hand, while I appreciate your comment, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but who cares? We're talking about lighting and you're boasting about wanting to be a natural light photographer. Are we supposed to care about that? Like, what did that contribute to the conversation? Again, I'm not trying to be a jerk. And I get it. The whole idea on YouTube, everybody's got to have an opinion. Everybody's got to weigh in on something. But, dude, you came to my channel in the middle of my show to talk about you wanting to be a natural light guy, not wanting to touch flash, and you're going to pimp another YouTuber, whom, by the way, I think is awesome. But seriously, keep it to yourself because we don't really care. Okay? Just saying, right? A little bit of etiquette here, folks. Be a part of the conversation or don't be a part of the conversation. So that being said, Greg, looking forward to seeing you in Austin. That will be cool. And by the way, for those of you that are in Texas, if you haven't been to Precision Camera, oh my God, check it out. Seriously, it's one of the coolest camera stores in the country. But it's huge. Number one, they've got an amazing studio. Austin has an incredible photography community down there. They really, really do. So Marcelo, do I use a light meter? I don't. Is it wrong to use a light meter? No, it's not. Do you need to use a light meter? Of course you don't, not in digital world. So why would you use a light meter? My thoughts on that are this. For the type of photography that you see me doing, the beauty portraits, the fashion portraits, and even regular portraiture, do you need a light meter? No. And that's part of why I don't use it. You work with your lighting enough, meaning you practice like I've recommended. You get to a point that you kind of know, hey, if I set this light down approximately 5 feet from my subject, and I've got the light at quarter power, I'm going to be shooting it at f5.6 or f8 with this modifier. You kind of get to know. And then you're going to take a test shot, you're going to look at it, and you're going to fine tune the exposure from there. It's honestly just as fast and just as efficient as a light meter, because at the end of the day with digital technology, trust the camera, not the light meter, right? If I were doing commercial work or high-end work that required exacting reproductions of tonal ranges and colors and all that kind of stuff, then I might be a little bit more inclined to say, yes, I want to use a light meter for everything. But it's very unlikely that you'll ever find me in a situation where I'm thinking I'm going to trust the light meter over what I'm seeing on my camera. So it's an expense that I don't really encourage people to put out. The only other benefit to using a light meter, and this is a benefit for a lot of people, the only other benefit is it slows you down, right? Using a light meter is a very deliberate process. So if you find that you're a little bit kind of type A and you you tend to miss over things, etc., then I would say using a light meter can actually be really, really beneficial, right? It can, help you out in the sense that it's kind of adding another step. And folks, a big part of this whole process of learning lighting and getting better at lighting, it is a discipline thing, right? The faster you go, the harder it is to see the little details. The faster you go, the easier it is to miss details and honestly get sloppy, right? So I would encourage, regardless of what gear you use, regardless of how far into the process you are, slow down, be very, very deliberate, okay? It helps to tether. I've talked about that before. It's worth mentioning it again. That's a big part of the reason why I started tethering, and now it's just a habitual part of my workflow. I don't like working without tethering, and at least onto a laptop. I mean, preferably onto a big screen, which is what I normally do. But as an example, yesterday and today, I was actually shooting. This was a rare time where Joe was doing product photography. My son and daughter-in-law have a small home decor business, and they've got a new line of products that are coming out, so they needed product shots. And of course, I get tapped to do the photography. So I was just working off of the laptop because these shots were fairly simple and fairly basic, but I'm still tethered, still making sure that I'm paying attention to details. And especially in the case of these product shots, I'm shooting all these different shots and they're all going to go on a web page where there has to be a certain amount of consistency to them. So by tethering, I'm seeing the bigger image. I can check placement. It's also easier to make sure like I don't have dust spots anywhere, which I'm then going to have to retouch, all those types of things. So tethering is a great tool, again, to kind of get you into a workflow. And I mentioned a few minutes ago, and then I want to see if you guys have any other questions to wrap up here, because I know I'm getting a ton of time. I mentioned a few minutes ago about kind of having a system. So let's just say that you're, doing, one light, two lights, wherever you are, you're just starting out or you're way into it. Get yourself into the habit of, okay, I moved my lights. I'm going to take a test shot. I'm going to check it. I'm going to take another test shot. I'm going to check it. My exposure is good. Okay, now I'm going to shoot. And literally get yourself into a habit of, if I do this, my next step is this. If I do this, my next step is this. You notice I'm not telling you what it should be. It depends on how your brain's wired. It depends on how you like to work on what you shoot. But you need to be consistent so that you're doing the workflow part the same way every time. That does not impede creativity. Not at all. It promotes creativity, because the more that you're building habits around the photography portion, the more space you have in your brain to be creative, to think outside the box, to look for new ideas and look for opportunities, etc. So that's kind of really the key. You want to get a workflow, you want to get a set of habits, and that's the same, honestly, when you're working in Photoshop and you're dealing like with Camera Raw and just doing your processing. In fact, I had a few people ask me in the last week or so, would you ever do your your Photoshop workflow and your Camera Raw processing? Well, for the whole last year, I was doing a presentation called The Secret Powers of Raw. So for those that have been asking me, apparently you didn't attend it. But maybe in a couple weeks, I'll go ahead and I'll dedicate a last frame to kind of what is my workflow, which again, doesn't make it the best, doesn't make it the only. So it's just one of many. And I do not consider myself to be the guy that you should be following for Photoshop by any means. In fact, if I'm going to recommend anybody, I'm going to recommend Unmistinda Piximperfect, hands down. But I will go ahead and I will kind of share what my workflow is, and I'll give you the whys so that you can then basically consider that with regards to your photography and decide whether or not you would want to apply any of that. So a couple of questions we had here. Rich, actually, you're correct. Competitive shooters know consistency equals accuracy. And I assure you, a great example of that that's happening like 24/7 right now is in Tokyo, Japan. And it's the sports shooters that are, shooting the Olympics. Those are guys that, they work habitually because they have got to be paying lots of attention and anticipating those great iconic moments that will come from a sporting event like that. So, all right, Gabriel, if you're going for full body on a white background, what are you using to light the background? Strip lights, doesn't matter. I hate strip lights. Now that I said that, let's back up a second and put some context into that, please. Because every time I make a statement like that, somehow it gets attached to me forever, and somebody decides, oh, you should never use strip lights. I just don't find strip lights to be that valuable for the kind of lighting, the feel of lighting, the way that I like to light. So generally for me, and now some people would argue, well, the strip light's going to give you more control in the background, Joe. And they are not wrong in that statement. However, keep in mind that I could just use a speedlight, 2 speedlights aimed at 45 degrees, or I could use 2 studio strobes with the 7-inch reflectors aimed at 45 degrees. And if I'm getting a little bit of spill on my subject or a little bit of flare into the camera, all I need to do is just put a flag in between them and the camera. See, the problem with a strip light on the background, if you don't have a lot of space to work with, if you can't back it up a decent distance, a strip light's a narrow strip of light. So it's not going to spread across the background. That's the challenge with a strip light. So I do not find strip lights to be ideal, as far as lighting a background in any way, shape, or form. I'd much rather work, if I was going to use a softbox to do it, which I don't ever, I would want to rather work with like a big, medium size, softbox. And even then, you still have to back it up a fair amount. The idea for lighting a background and lighting that background evenly, Gabriel, is you need light spread, right? If you want that background lit even, you've got to get your light to cover as much of the background as possible. And this, gang, and Gabriel, part of your task, this is where you have to really pay attention to the inverse square law, right? So here's the link. I talk about it all the time. I don't think enough people watch it, but here's the link to the inverse square law video that I did. Watch it more than once, and understand that after you watch it, you still don't understand the inverse square law. You have to go play with the lights and try and replicate some of the things and learn from it, okay? But the most important thing with background is you want the spread. That's why you'll notice even with, here, let me go back to the diagram. The diagram that I'm working with, if I turn off the blue light here and you'll notice as close as that light is, that light's about 3 to 3.5 feet from the background. I'm not able to light the background evenly at that distance. The light doesn't have enough time to spread. That's why it's brighter and then it gets darker. But if I take that light and I move it out to here, and we're going to aim it, let me adjust it a little bit here. We're going to turn it in and also up a little bit. And then I turn the power up. I can get the right side of the frame much more even, but then I'm getting fall off on the left side, right? So that's where it actually becomes beneficial to essentially kind of have 2 of them, because then with 2, let me see, we'll duplicate that one and we'll bring, whoops, that was the camera. I didn't want to move the camera. Let's try that again. Sorry, it dropped that light in a really weird place for me. Let's turn that off. And move that to the background. And I'm trying to do this in a hurry, so of course it's sloppy, but you can get a sense now, with the two lights, and I don't have them aimed perfectly right now, but since we're running out of time, you can see how I'm able to get lighting that's more even. But because I have this back pretty far, notice how I'm getting some spill on my subject's face. So I have two options. One is I move it back a little bit and some of the spill goes away. The other one is go ahead and flag it, and now the spill goes away completely, right? So, um, many different ways to do it, but with the background, the challenge is whatever modifier you're going to use, reflector, strip box, softbox, whatever. Your goal is to get the light as even as possible across that background. Okay. Let's see. Terry J, I hope you remember a month back you mentioned that you might share some of those product images, and I will. I just actually started shooting finished images today. I've got another day of shooting tomorrow. So probably next week, actually, I will share some. And believe me, they're nothing like, super exciting, but I'll show you how I did them. I'm using the 65-inch television. So I'm using the LED TV background. We purchased some stock images that are creating the backgrounds. And the backgrounds, of course, are very soft, out of focus. But, and these are kind of or wine glass shaped candles. So a lot of glass, white glass. So it's highly reflective. But yes, you have my word. Once I get this whole set done and they've got them up on their website, I'll show you kind of start to finish how we broke it down, including how I did my very first test shots, actually with an iPhone, just to kind of manipulate things and play around with it to get a feel for my idea. Was it going to work? And then, from that point going ahead and starting to work in with strobes. And I actually did my test shots over 2 days because I knew that I had a lot of shots to do with this, and I was very happy with what I had at the end of the first day, but I'm glad I waited, came back the next day and started again because I did wind up making one crucial change that actually made a big difference in the shots that I wasn't seeing the day before. So I actually put a little bit of space in there, and it really helped. So yes, Terry, don't worry. I will, as soon as I have the project finished, I will share all that with you guys, and we can all nerd out on product photography one night, which is obviously, not my normal thing, not why people come here, but yeah, it's kind of fun to talk about because what you're going to find in the end is that a lot of the lighting challenges and things we're doing, it's really no different than photographing people. The glass does present some issues, but there's actually some real simple tricks for kind of getting around that. Okay. All right, gang. So you've all got some homework. And I hope, sincerely, I mean, honestly, especially after doing the 3 weeks, I hope that you will consider the idea, and even if you're a couple years into your photography, and if you've been doing lighting, if you're not able to say, my lighting is awesome, if you're not able to say that, I would encourage you, go back to the beginning, one light. And, if you're already out there making money, good for you. But if your lighting is not awesome, for practice work, go back to the beginning. When you go out and do a job, do what you're doing. But go back to the beginning and work with one light. Master that one light and put the experience in. Try my 10-foot circle. Piece of string. Works wonders. Okay? It also helps you make sure that you're not putting your modifiers too close. Remember I talked about when we did the modifier series, the problem with putting modifiers too close, you light up a shoulder or forehead more than the rest of the face, right? That string helps with that. Practice that, master that one light, and I promise you, as you start to add your lights back in, your lighting will be at a whole different level because you're going to see what those lights are doing instantly. It kind of screams at you because it becomes very obvious. So anyway, gang, have a great week. Make sure you get out and take some pictures. TOGCHAT podcast this week, very interesting for those of you, since we're talking about product photography, Terry. This week I have an interview with a product stylist from New York. So this is a woman whose job is to kind of create the flat lays and create all the really cool arrangements that make products look so cool when photographers photograph them. So that'll be coming out on Friday. Make sure you check that out. And in case you missed last week's awesome interview with Joseph Ellis, who is a family portrait and wedding photographer from down in Dallas, Texas. We talk a lot about weddings, but even if you're not interested in, making that your business or shooting weddings, A lot of really, really good business bits in that interview. So if you're looking to make money, I highly encourage you check out that interview. But as always, gang, thank you so much. Please remember Photo Expo Live, Bedford's. The link is below the video. It's free. Why would you miss it, right? Have a great week, gang. Stay safe. Take care. Bye now.